Dear students, in this lesson we're going to see how to solve quadratic equations by using the completing the square method. This method, this is a method which we can use to solve any quadratic equation. Always that equation has to have a solution. So there are some steps which we need to follow. I'm going to write down the steps first, then we're going to work out the various examples so that you can be able to understand the method. So what we need to do, these are the steps which we need to follow. Step number 1, divide equation by coefficient of x squared. Step number 2, place constant on other side of equation. Step number 3, add to both sides of equation I'm going to change color here. You need to add half of the coefficient of x squared. Okay, so you take the coefficient of x, you halve it, and you square it, and you add it to both sides of the equation. Step number 4, perform a perfect square on one side and simplify the other side. Step number 5, solve the equation. So these are the 5 steps which we need to follow so that we are able to solve by completing the square. So let's now try to remember them, and we're going to work out various examples. So let me remind you again, we have to divide the equation by the coefficient of x squared, by the number in front of x squared. Then we take the constant, the one which doesn't include x, and take it to the other side of the equation. Then we add to both sides of equation this in red here, half the coefficient of x squared. Then we have to perform a perfect square on one side and simplify the other side, finally solve the equation. So let's see a couple of examples. So example number 1, solve using the method of perfect squares. 2x squared plus 6x minus 9 is equal to 0. I'm going to start by solving that equation. So the coefficient of x squared is 2, so the first step I am going to divide the whole equation by 2. The first step, divide by the coefficient of x squared. So I get x squared plus 3x minus 9 on 2 is equal to 0. Now, you're going to see me leaving everything as fractions. It's better if you leave them fractions because many times those fractions will be recurring fractions, recurring decimals, so it's not advisable to change those to decimals. So let's continue. So that was the first step. Second step, place the constant on the other side of the equation. So I have x squared plus 3x. I'm going to leave a space here is equal to 9 on 2 because negative 9 on 2 on the other side becomes 9 on 2. Now, the third step, which I wrote in red, I'm going to write it in red again here. So I have to add a square bracket to both sides of the equation, and inside that square bracket I'm going to place half the coefficient of x. Now the coefficient of x is plus 3, so that's plus 3 on 2. Again, it is advisable to leave it as a fraction, right? Now, on our left hand side we have a perfect square. So I'm going to perform the perfect square, x plus 3 on 2. If you notice, x squared I wrote x, 3 on 2 squared, I wrote plus 3 on 2, is equal to, and I am going to simplify this part of the equation. That's 9 on 2 plus 9 on 4, so that's 18 plus 9, 27 on 4. Okay, so you can use your calculator to work this out, or otherwise do it mentally. Now I've got an equation, I need to solve the equation. So x plus 3 on 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 27 on 4. So x is equal to minus 3 on 2 plus or minus the square root of 27 on 4. And there I have my two solutions. My two solutions, which are minus 3 on 2 plus the square root of 27 on 4 and minus 3 on 2 minus the square root of 27 on 4. Then you can use your calculator to write your answers correct to 2 decimal places. So that was our first example. As you can see, if you follow the steps, these are always the same, so it won't be that difficult. Let's work out another example. Solve 3x squared minus 7x minus 4 is equal to 0. Okay, so this time I'm going to divide by the coefficient of x squared, which is 3. Dividing by 3, I get x squared minus 7 on 3x minus 4 on 3 is equal to 0. That was the first step. Second step, place the constant on the other side of the equation. So I have x squared minus 7 on 3x is equal to 4 on 3. Third step, add square bracket to both sides of the equation. Inside the square bracket, I'm going to have minus 7 on 3. So that's minus 7 on 6. Now I got a perfect square on this side, so it is x minus 7 on 6 squared is equal to, and I'm going to work this out, so that's 4 on 3 plus 49 on 36, which is equal to 97 on 36. Okay, so I got now x minus 7 on 6 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 97 on 36. So x is 7 on 6 plus or minus the square root of 97 on 36. You've got your two answers. X is 7 on 6 plus the square root of 97 on 36. And x is 7 on 6 minus the square root of 97 on 36. Okay, so we've got two examples. I think those two examples are enough for you to be able to understand this method. Of course, working it out alone might be slightly more difficult. Okay, so I suggest you work out a couple of these. Now, let me show you this. Using this method, I can solve any quadratic equation which has a solution. So let us suppose I have solve ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, so that's a quadratic equation. Instead of numbers, this time I have letters. Same method, I'm going to use same method, and I'm going to arrive at an answer. Okay, so first step was divide by the coefficient of x squared, so I'm going to divide by a. I get x squared plus b over ax plus c over a is equal to 0. Second step was remove the constant, the one without x, to the other side of the equation. So I get x squared plus b on ax equals minus c on a. Third step was add a square bracket to both sides of the equation. Inside the square bracket, you have to place half the coefficient of x, which in this case is b onto a. So that's b onto a plus, okay, plus b onto a. So now I have a perfect square on the left-hand side. So x plus b on 2a squared is equal to, and I'm going to simplify this. So minus c on a plus b squared on 4a squared. 4a squared is a denominator. Multiplying by 4a, I get minus 4ac plus b squared, and that is simplified. So x plus b on 2a is plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac on 4a squared. Now you think that you are familiar with this, okay? So x equals minus b on 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. I've done this because 4a squared is a square number, so I can root it. Square root of 4 is 2, of a squared is a. So x equals minus b plus minus square root b squared minus 4ac on 2a. And that is the formula which we normally use to solve quadratic equations when our numbers are not so simple. Okay? That's all for this lesson. Hope you understood the lesson. Feel free to contact me if need be. Good day.